Folks, if I can get your attention, I have 6:30. If we'll please stand or just, no, keep your seats. I'm sorry. Keep your seats. Sorry, Letta Jean. Let's have a moment of silence before we start our public forum. I'm in. The commissioners, you have the agenda before you for the public forum. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move to adopt the agenda.
Thank you, Jane. Do I have a second? Second from Kitty. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Agenda is adopted. Floor is open for public comments. Come on, Letta Jean.
Letta Jean Taylor, 386 Oklahoma Road in Montreat. Okay. You have on your agenda tonight the public hearing and then the vote immediately afterwards. And I would respectfully ask that you not have public hearings and votes on the same night. It makes those in the public who have things to say, make it feel it's not worth anything if you're gonna have a public hearing and then vote immediately.
Thank you, Letta Jean. Mary? Welcome back, Mary. Well, I imagine you've got suffering from a little jet lag too.
Indeed it is, and indeed I am. I'm glad to be back, and I can tell you there's nothing in Ireland or Scotland that compares to what we have here in Montreat. It's great to be back. Mary Standard, 118 Shenandoah Terrace. Just first a question. Tonight, I know you're getting the report on the 2021 audit. Will we have a time to ask questions during that, or is this the time for questions?
I would suggest now, Mary.
Okay, good. Then I will go ahead and have what I have to say then. First of all, could someone give me the formula by which the fund balance is actually calculated?
Ben, do you
Have a-
have an idea? what that
The
is?
exact formula that was used in 2020. And since that's our savings account and it's a percentage, it would be
Right.
good to know that formula.
Mary, that's a good question. I'd have to defer to our finance director, but typically it could be used. Your fund balances is the monies compared to your budgeted expenditures. Now, some I have heard does to the actual expenditures.
Perhaps at some point in time, if she's here, it would be good to know, since that does involve both a numerator and a denominator and has a big influence on what that percentage is. If she could tell us exactly what that is.
That's a very
and
good question.
it's a crucial question
Certainly,
to be
and I-
quite frank.
And I'll
Well-
get that answer to you, Mary.
And during the presentation by the auditor, we can ask the auditor that question for you.
But I'd sort of like to be in a position to follow up once I get that answer is what I'm sort of aiming for, because I know the February meeting was sort of an eye-opening meeting for all of us, the February in which we finally got our 2020 audit. It was a huge wake-up call for all of us, and to find that our fund balance had dropped during that year from basically 90% to 16%. And that it had some history along with that. And I know that y'all have, it was sent in finally almost a year late to North Carolina Treasurer's Department, and it has now been reviewed. And there were a number of questions asked by the Treasury Department to which the council responded. And I do have a copy of both those questions and the response to that. So one of the questions that I have for you, and as again, I say a lot of this is process for me, but I think process is the key to keeping us away from lawsuits and away from problems, and the fiscal oversight that y'all have started engaging has been crucial to all of this. But basically, one of the questions that I had, it was very specific that all of the council members were to respond in writing to that letter, and that all of were to sign. So I wanted to ask Commissioner Fauché and Commissioner Otto, their names were not on that letter. If they have seen the letter and if they concur with the letter, or if you corresponded separately with Mrs. McCollum, who made that request that all underlined commissioners should sign that. So that's question number one. If y'all corresponded separately, since all the commissioners were asked to sign.
Mary, with all due respect, I'm all but certain they all signed it. I don't know if that was on the second page. That may not have.
I did not see that. The only signatures that I saw on what I received were Widmer and Alexander, the mayor, and Mason. So did y'all sign that letter and see it? I mean, that's fine with me. It's great. And I had wondered
I
that
think
myself.
those were the people that were at the meeting. I was out of town and signed it later.
Yeah, it just did not show up. So you've seen the letter then?
Yes.
Okay, and you did sign it later. And Commissioner Otto, it did not show up on what I was given to follow up. One of the things that in the response that they asked about was the fund balance. And that's the reason I specifically asked about how it was calculated, to make sure that the 2020 and the 2021 fund balances, we're talking apples to apples and oranges to oranges. And so as I read the audit or the annual financial report that goes in, which there's nothing more fun than sitting down on a pleasant day with a cup of coffee and trying to read through those audits that we have. But basically, I know that earlier there had been some thought, and even the letter back to the Treasury Department, that it went from the 16% to 32% was the initial report. But in fact, I just wanted to confirm, apples to apples and orange to oranges, it went from 16% to 24%. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that's where we stand on 20. So we're still a far ways from the 35%. Not the 32% that you had hoped for and initially thought. So that is correct. Okay. And that dramatic drop from the 90% to the 16% that we had, I think probably caught everybody a bit unawares or surprise. I will just go ahead and call it what it is. It was disappointing that the last town manager did not present it until his last meeting that we were here. And much as I hate to say that, it is disappointing because we really didn't get a chance to follow up with Mr. Carmichael directly on why that took so long and why it was his last meeting that was presented to the audit committee and to the general public. And that big decrease from the 90% to the 16% was definitely associated with the building activity, both of this building and of the Public Works building. And that took a great deal of the money out of it and contributed. But I was also wanted to ask a question about the response that the town made with response to the decline in the general fund. And this is, and I'll just go ahead and read this verbatim so that there's no confusion, because it comes a bit of confusion as you start talking. What was the cost of this town hall versus the town hall project? And these things get lost in the nuances. But the responses to why there was such a dramatic drop in the fund balance was, this is from the town back to Mrs. McCollum. Your observation about the use of general funds for the two major capital projects during that period are correct. The town had been saving, quote unquote, for the town hall for several years to reduce the debt service in the new building. Okay. However, the project, like so many construction projects, exceeded our overall budget of $1.69 million. Okay. So that was the budget, was 6.9 million, according to what y'all wrote back, not what I'm saying or what we think. 1.69 million for this building, which is a beautiful building, by the way. Anyway, totaling project cost was 1.94 million at completion, exceeding the budget by $255,000. So that was sort of an eye opener that in addition to the budget, that it was over budget just for the town hall by $255,000. So my question is, at what point in time did the council that had oversight, and I really realize how hard it is for the council to know what's going on. You're totally dependent on staff and there's a lag time of going on. So I want to tell you that I appreciate that, but I would have liked to have some idea of when y'all became aware that it was $255,000 over budget for the town hall, bringing the total for the town hall to 1.94 million, town hall project to 1.94 million over the 1.69. So it's a timing question that I'm asking.
We're glad to have you back.
Thank you. It's good to be back. I'm not so sure about that, but okay.
As you and I have discussed.
We have.
We discussed this actual question. And as I mentioned to you, the 1.69 was the actual construction cost. It did not include the other costs such as land, surveys, engineering, design, and those other costs that added up to that other 250,000. So when that much money is being talked about and the word budget is used, then I think that there was some confusion regarding what the 1.69 budget was.
I'm just really reflecting what this town, it's over your signature. Those are the numbers I'm
Understand that.
using. So that's very critical to this.
Understand that.
So it exceeded our overall budget by $255,000. So I mean, if you had, when did you become aware that it exceeded the budget by
Well,
that
I'm-
very substantial
But
amount?
I'm telling you that it did not exceed because the construction cost budget was 1.69. The actual cost of this building was 1.64.
I'm not
So
sure.
it was
We,
under budget.
we've had that discussion before. This is the reason I bring it up in public because it's a way of presenting it.
Sure.
Because what you wrote back is very clear, is that it exceeded the budget. And so I would respectfully
And
disagree with your interpretation of
but-
that.
all right, you're certainly free to disagree, but I'm telling you what the facts are.
And I'm telling you, I'm reading what you wrote back to the state treasurer about exceeding the budget. So you either have a budget or you exceeded the budget, but we could debate this. And that's one reason, as we have, because I asked you these questions and you didn't really come to a resolution at that point in time. But anyway, these things significantly depleted the 90% fund balance back down to the 16% have. So I think we need to recognize that that's a matter of fiscal attention to detail by staff and as much as you can by the sitting commissioners. And I guess I'm more than willing to let someone come up at this point in time.
Mary, speed it up.
Well, but I'm, okay, well, if someone else wants to come up, I'm more than willing, but
You're
I,
fine, but you're wasting time by saying somebody else come up. Get to the next point. Go ahead. Not trying to be ugly, but I
no,
want you to be
okay,
able to say what you want to say and be done with it.
okay. Well, I would just like to go ahead and ask, commissioners, I think you had said that last time that we, had a couple $100,000 under budget for the last fiscal year. Is that correct? This was at the last meeting.
Yes. You mean for 11 months?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what time frame we were
Right,
talking
for
about.
11 months.
It's a
and-
current time frame.
And for 12 months, it's $277,000 under budget.
So I'd sort of like to know what those categories were. That's a lot of paper clips and where those savings were held, especially on top of the $145,000 that we have for the lawsuit that, well, or the zoning board of adjustment. You have a big, so what were those savings? Were they salaries, projects not done?
Yeah.
Where were they?
I don't have that that level of detail.
We can have Ben try to get you an
Some of it was
accounting of
in,
that.
salaries that were not filled or positions that were not filled. So obviously salaries, some was just that the revenues exceeded expenditures overall. And then some of the expenditures that we had budgeted for came in actually less.
Okay, that's basically almost a $400,000 swing along with the Board of Adjustments, which is huge. So I'm a little surprised that there's not a better handle on where all those savings came from, but that's just my opinion for that. So thank you very much.
Mary, we've got a handle on it. He's trying to recap what the overall savings was, where we got it. If you
And-
want a detailed report, we can have you one.
That's fine. I mean, those are, as I say, that's a lot of paper clips. And I would just make a comment, you know, especially with respect to Commissioner Otto's comments, I believe last time about the bear problem that we have. It would be great if some of those monies could go to replace a second trash collection during the summer. There seems to be a bit of a correlation, far low than it may be
I'd
between.
like to see
Yes.
I'd like to see every house in Montreat with a bear-proof box too.
Well, there's supposed
We
to
may come to that.
or enough to fit all the traffic. But anyway, it'd be good to see that number, some of that money spent on extra trash collection during the summer. So thank you for that, Kent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Who's up next? Public comment time. Got about 12 minutes left. Wade?
Good evening. Wade Burns, somewhere between North Carolina Terrace and Virginia Road. I have been involved in stormwater issues for the last number of years. And on the Planning and Zoning Commission and now in real life as a home builder up in ETJ. And a number of folks have expressed concerns about stormwater runoff because we have stormwater runoff. And the paddle boats are beaching themselves on 3 inches of water somewhere in the middle of the lake. So we have issues. And I'm up in that ETJ area. And we've had a number of heavy rains in the last 3 weeks. And the erosion, when you've got slope, the erosion can't be controlled if it's gravel roads and no stormwater system other than the natural springways. And so I'm excited to do anything I can to help. I have proposed a couple of capital projects that I think Blue Earth I looked at one of them right at here where we would catch all the sediment coming down Rainbow. And then I've talked about another one between the bridge by the barn and the left bank where the water could be baffled so that sediment could be collected. And without that, the lake is doing it. And also have pushed for annexation of that area up there where we're putting sewer and roads and so forth. And that's been blocked by citizens who didn't want to do a voluntary annexation. But we've got growth going like crazy from here all the way around us. We're building right now. I think Theodosia Wade's going to build up there. We have a couple of the lots. And so there's going to be some development. And I'm just here to volunteer as a 49 years now as an architect planner. If I can help on anything, whether it's stormwater or how you would actually do public improvements up there and get them financed and the city come out ahead. I've done a lot of work on those issues through the years and would be glad to donate any time I can to the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Wade. Floor is still open for about 10 more minutes. Anybody, anything? Comments, questions? A song? Seeing no one jump up, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn for 10 minutes until we start our regular meeting. Have a motion from Mayor Pro Tem Whitmer. Do I have a second? Second from Commissioner Blake. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned.
Comes in right on time, doesn't she? Sonia. No. What is? Uh-huh.
You playing golf?
So it would be. Conditional change.
You get there on all the golf.
This is the first time I've had to sign one of these. This is. Yes. I knew everybody signed it because I saw it when it was all signed, so.
Sailboat.
Good, Tom. Let me turn.
Folks, I've got 7 o'clock. If you will, please stand and face the flag and let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody. Let's all stand for a moment of silence and please remember Philip Arendt, Dave Arendt's father who passed away in the last couple of weeks. Thank you. Amen. Commissioners, you've seen the agenda. I'm going to ask for an adoption, but I believe you have an amendment to it. Mason? Is this the council meeting minutes of July the 14th?
Okay. Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have some revisions to the minutes of July 14, 2022. Under the heading Mayor's Communications, at the bottom of page 1, I would like for the balance to move the balance of that paragraph, beginning with the sentence starting Mayor Helms then took a moment to read as follows. Mayor Helms then took a moment to apologize to the Montreat stewards for an inadvertent misstatement that he made at the June 9th Town Council meeting. At the meeting, Mayor Helms stated that all members of the Board of Adjustment would be deposed by the plaintiffs. But the plaintiffs, in a meeting with the mayor, advised him they do not plan on deposing members of the Board of Adjustment unless new information unless new information obtained in discovery warrants doing so. And I think that more correctly reflects what you in fact said, Tom.
Okay.
I then have at the end of bottom of page 8, and at the beginning of the last line, it says misstatement. I'd like to, and it reads, Mr. Harry T. Jones of 300 North Carolina Terrace also thanked Mayor Helms for his earlier misstatement. I think that misstatement should be replaced with the word remarks. Under new business, under A, the first bullet item And the second bullet item in the third to the last line of each paragraph, I would replace the word build with construction. And Angie's, I told you I've got these handwritten down. And then at the end of the last bullet item under A, I'd like to add the following sentence. Once I get my glasses on. Mr. Blake noted that any violation of the conditions would constitute a violation of the conditional zoning ordinance and provide the town with all rights available to it under the all available rights to it for a zoning ordinance violation, period. And that's the end of my revisions to those minutes.
All right, commissioners, you've heard the amendments. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as amended, which includes the minutes of the July 14th Town Council minutes meeting?
Mr. Mayor, I would ask that the commissioners consider an additional amendment to the minutes on page 10 under new business, agenda item D. Actually, that was conducting a public hearing and adopting the resolution of intent to consider the closure of a portion of North Carolina Terrace. So the minutes should reflect the adoption of the resolution.
Okay. We've got multiple amendments. Commissioners, you've heard the amendments. Can I get an agenda adoption with the changes in the amendment and the motion? I mean, the minutes. Have a motion from Commissioner Fouché. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Alexander. Discussion? Questions? All those signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes carry. The only communication I have tonight is Kayla Christina. Kayla, where are you? Will you stand up? Kayla has joined us. Ben, would you like to say a few words about Kayla?
Yes, sir. I would, the town staff as well as the town organization is really pleased to have Kayla Christina on board as our newest zoning administrator. She's came in with her feet on the ground and her head and mind dedicated to serving the community of Montreat. She's already, her first 2 weeks here, she's been bathed in fire, and she's really demonstrated the qualities of a professional zoning administrator and planner. And welcome aboard, Kayla. You're an asset to our community.
Thanks, Kayla. Welcome.
What her hours are?
Thank you, Kayla. All right, by adopting the agenda, Ben, you want to cover the your communications and the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, and Commissioners, they're included in your agenda packet for consideration.
Thank you, Ben. Okay,
Ben, did you, after we talked yesterday, did you and or Angie get any further information about the implications of the executive order expiration on Monday? And can you share that with us?
Yes, sir. And I would defer to our town clerk, Ms. Angie Murphy, for that explanation to the full board.
So the most recent information I have is a blog post from the School of Government. And it says that after the order's lifted, which I believe is on the 19th, that the executive board can no longer meet remotely due to quorum issues and voting. There is still some consideration of the appointed boards, like Planning and Zoning, Board of Adjustment, that kind of thing, that they're not sure of. I sent in an email for clarification and I haven't received anything back yet. So I'll follow up when I get a response.
And you'll let us and the chairs of those committees and commissions
Mhm.
know.
I will.
Great, thanks.
It's surprising you had to write the government for clarification. Ben, do you have any other comments tonight?
Nothing further, Mayor.
Okay. Commissioners, you've received the administrative reports, the finance report, planning and zoning, police, public works and water, sanitation and streets. Do you have any comments and or questions on any of those? Hearing none, the floor is open for public comment on anything. Yes, sir.
My name is Jonathan Smith. I'm the secretary of the Mount Mitchell Bear Hunting
Jonathan,
Club.
could you move that up to your? There you go.
There you
They're
go.
really sensing.
Okay. My name is Jonathan Smith. I'm the secretary of the Mount Mitchell Bear Hunting Club. I'm here on behalf of Jim Gibbs, who you have heard from in previous meetings on this topic. I'm speaking specifically on agenda item under new business, item E, which is a consideration of ordinance revisions related to bear hounds and running through the town of Montreat. Just want to make a couple of brief comments here on that. As Jim has indicated, our president in previous meetings, we've made a number of efforts on our end, given our proximity to the town related to the issues that y'all have faced. We have created vehicle decals for our members to have on their vehicles when they transport through the town of Montreat, and also if they are faced with the challenge of capturing hounds that find their way into Montreat. We've also changed the way that we operate within our club property, which is adjoining the ridge line just above Montreat. In addition, we held a meeting of our houndsmen this past month to convey some of the concerns of the town and to hopefully mitigate some of the issues that might occur from any of our hounds entering the town. I did want to raise, and we certainly thank the commission for allowing us to be a part of the discussion and the consideration development of the ordinance changes today. But I did want to just raise a couple of comments. We do have one concern, one kind of outstanding concern, main concern with Article 3 of the revisions related to the establishment of fines for multiple hounds finding their way through town. While we have made these measures and will continue to accommodate additional mitigation efforts to keep our hounds out of the town, we can't certainly guarantee that our hounds, despite our best efforts, might find their way in town. In fact, I think it's quite likely that at some point, hounds from our club will chase a bear into Montreat. And so we interpret those fines as being something that's a bit of a challenge for us. I'd also point out that Article 8, which deals with the notification process for a hunter who might need to retrieve hounds that find their way into the town of Montreat, requires contact with the chief of police and or the non-district, I think it's the non-dispatch number. And there are fines associated with failure to do that. And those two ordinances kind of work at cross purposes, and there's a bit of a disincentive to follow one section of the ordinance versus another. So we would just ask that you consider some of those challenges and some of the impacts that those have on our club. We're certainly willing to continue to work with the town as you consider this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Floor is open for public comment. Seeing no one come forward, we'll move on to next item on the agenda. There is no old business to consider tonight. Under item 10, there is new business. We have our auditor here, and we have financial statements to be presented to the town.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Lavonia Reese with Carter PC. I'm the audit director and have worked on catching the town up on audits for fiscal year 2021. We are here to discuss the results of the 2021 audit. I label 2021 as the recovery year. So 2020 was kind of our COVID year. 2021 is in recovery. And I met with the audit committee. We went over the financial statements in detail, all 100 and some odd pages of those. And so what I want to do tonight is I would just like to present to you overall view of what 2021 looks like, some financial highlights, and then plans for also for 2022. So internal control related matters, we noted a few matters back in 2020. One of those related to fund balance restrictions was not repeated in 2021. So we noted accounting record adjustment for accounting records for the audit, inadequate software, which has been taken care of, my understanding as of July of 2022. And then segregation of duties. These items were all listed as either material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in the letter, which required us to communicate those in writing. So management does have a copy of that letter as well as the audit committee that I presented to. Our audit report was dated June 16th, 2022. So you may note that our 2020 report was issued back in December. So it is unusual that you would see me twice in the matter of about 6 months, but you're going to see me again within 6 months. And so that's a good thing. So we plan on getting 2022 wrapped up fairly quickly. We had no disagreements with management and no difficulties in getting the information to complete the audit. The town of Montreat prepares an ACFR, so that is the annual comprehensive financial report. That's unusual for smaller towns. And in fact, for us, we don't see it very often. But what that does is that means that the town takes extra efforts in order to present a statistical section at the end of your financial statement. So it probably adds another 20 or so pages of historical financial information, both from your statement of net position, your major property owners within the town of Montreat. The audit also noted a budget violation on the general fund for transfers, mostly related to capital expenditures, because local governments in the state of North Carolina are so heavily controlled by a budget and restricted by the budget. If there are any violations of expenditures over what was budgeted, it is required to be communicated and written into your audit report, as well as a corrective action plan presented. So most of those had to do with the budget violation, had to do with transfers from the general fund into to make capital project improvements. There was also a non-compliance with your fund balance policy. So you're required to have 35% of budgeted expenditures available. So in 2021, if you remember, we reported that number was 16%. It has increased to 28.6 for 2021. So far in planning for 2022, to anticipate a question, we do not have those numbers just yet. So we're waiting on final approval once we get further in our audit process. Also unmodified audit opinion. So unmodified is the clean opinion. It sounds like a negative word beginning with the word un, but it is the clean opinion. And we give an opinion on the overall financial statements as well as any major funds. So your major funds are your general fund. General fund, according to local government commission, is always a major fund. And then also a capital projects fund for Texas road capital improvements. So a quick, you have a question?
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
And I'm back a paragraph.
Okay, sure.
I'm back to your statement about the fund balance. You stated that it was 28.6%. The audit report, the financial report on page 4 indicates that it's 24.16%. Can you clarify?
It should be in your corrective action plan. It should be on page, I don't have a copy of the financial statements. It's on note 2, maybe around page 30. Maybe not that far back on page 30 for the corrective action plan. So the fund balance violation. So there are several percentages, and I think you're in the MD&A, the management discussion and analysis at the beginning. So there are different percentages. So the fund balance policy is 35% or more of budgeted expenditures. So I can't remember exactly what's on the MD&A, but if you will look on note 2 in the financial statements,
Page 32 of the report.
So that will detail the actual budget violation as well as management's corrective action plan to correct that going forward.
Okay, could you just say that one more time of the difference between the page 4, 24.16% and the page 32, 28.6%? I mean, we'd love it to be 28.6.
I would have to look at page 4 in the MD&A and see exactly what that percentage of the fund balance is. It could be of actual expenditures versus budgeted expenditures.
It simply says of total general fund expenditures.
Okay, so those are
And-
actual expenditures.
Okay,
And then the fund balance policy, the 35% is on budgeted.
gotcha. Thank you.
Governmental financial statements tell you everything 15 different ways. Okay, so any other questions on just the overall of the financials before I give just a few specific highlights? Okay, so on the government-wide financial statements, the net position of the town increased about $327,000. So net position is basically your net worth if we were talking in for-profit terms. That is a result of increase in assets of about $270,000, most of that just in cash. So assets are increasing, liabilities are decreasing about $40,000, mostly due to principal payments on debt. The majority of your debt is for town hall renovation. So there's about $950,000 of debt for town hall renovations. And then about $520,000 for retirement. So retirement for both the local government employees and then also law enforcement officers have a separate special pension plan that gets recorded on the books. So net position ending as of 6/30/21 was 7.9 million. Of that 7.9, $6.5 million is your investment in capital assets. So that's your total assets less any accumulated depreciation. So that's your net book value, not your fair market value. And of that, 1.1 million is unrestricted. So 1.1 million in reserves is completely unrestricted. The general fund, which is the main operating fund for all local governments in the state of North Carolina, your general fund had a ending fund balance of $725,000, which was an increase of $30,000 for that fiscal year 2021. Your general fund revenues were about 1.9 million, which was 320,000 more than budgeted revenue. So actual revenues, 320,000 more than budgeted. And then expenses were, can't read my writing here. Expenses were $150,000 less than budgeted expenses. Now, I did mention the transfers for the budget violation. So transfers were $160,000 more than budget, which caused the budget violation. Your water fund had an ending net position of about 1.9 million, also showing a net income, if we want to talk in for-profit terms, of 63,000. And the net property valuation, so net property would be gross property less any exemptions, and then also taking into account any discoveries or releases, 251 million for 2021, which was an increase of about 2 million, if I'm remembering correctly. And the town has consistently maintained right at 100% collection rates on property tax, both property, real property, and then also on registered motor vehicles, which is separately stated in your financials. A quick update for 2022. So we issued in June. It takes considerable effort on both your staff's part and our part to get 2 audits issued within 6 months. So be sure to show appreciation for your staff. We are planning to have our June 30, 2022 audit report issued before or close to the October 31st local government commission deadline, which is for at the end of the 4th month after your fiscal year. So we're have a target completion date of October 31st. So I hope to see you guys again sometime in November or December.
Questions?
Your last statement is a little troubling. You've given yourself some wiggle room for us to miss the required date from the state on the submission of the audit. And I don't think we can afford a third time to miss the submission of our audit. So can you commit to having it ready by the date that we are told to, October
We-
31st?
We have our audit schedule planned to meet the deadline, assuming we have all the information we need to complete the audit. Yes, we will
Okay.
have it. And when I say when I will see you in November or December, I mean that we submit the audit to the local government commission. I can't remember the date we submitted the 2021. It takes them usually several weeks, sometimes on October 31st, which October 31st is the municipality deadline for all municipalities in North Carolina. So we are at their mercy on their approval. So I typically wait for my presentation to the board once they've done their approval. So that we got the approval. So our report was dated June 16th, 2022. We did not receive approval from the local government commission till I believe it was the middle of July. So it took them about a month to approve the 2021. So I would expect to show up in October or November to present once they've given their final approval.
Okay, and I didn't mean to sound that severe, but just making sure that you are committed, provided that we get you the information you need to have it submitted by the deadline, whether they approve it then or not.
Yes, that is correct. We
Okay.
have adjusted our audit scheduling such that we have the personnel available to get the audit complete by the original 10/31 deadline.
Great.
That's great. That's very important.
Any other questions?
Any other questions, comments? I want to thank you all so much for helping us and working with staff so diligently and with the audit committee. Hugh, thank you for you and your committee and all the work y'all did.
The staff really, I mean, I cannot express to you how difficult it is to issue 2 audits in a short period of time. Sometimes it takes 6 months plus another 6 months to issue 1 audit. So having to simultaneously work on 2 audits, and then as soon as one is issued, start on to the next 2022. I mean, we've kind of been sending emails and communicating with staff, it feels like for 2 years in a row. So I'm sure they'll be ready after October 31st to get rid of us for a little while.
A little while, we start all over again shortly after that.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Thank you so much. And you're welcome to slip out. I don't think you want to stay for the rest of this, do you?
I'm gonna go home and hopefully eat dinner with my family.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Item B, Ben, you're going to present that, aren't you?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, if you'll look on page 133 of your agenda material, you'll see a resolution for consideration by the Board of Commissioners of the Town of Montreat in reference to our stormwater program. 6 weeks ago, the town was audited by the state of North Carolina. This was a planned audit, wasn't a surprise audit, to look at our stormwater policy and its best management practices. There were some deficiencies or violations that were noted. Those deficiencies actually were in regard to updating our existing policy, which we are currently doing, as well as some verbiage and language that needed to be updated as well. I'm not aware of any physical conditions of our stormwater infrastructure currently in the town that was found in violation. Our Public Works Director has worked diligently with the state representatives as well as Ms. Mary Roderick, that is our stormwater coordinator, or developing the policy, I should say. So what you have in front of you tonight is a resolution recognizing that the town of Montreat has these deficiencies in its stormwater best management practices or its policies, and that we are making a commitment to correct those and dedicate both the funding and manpower required to be in compliance with our MS4 stormwater policy and program. And I would add that Mary Roderick was unable to attend tonight's meeting to answer any questions that the commissioners may have, but she has set it on her calendar to be at the September meeting in order to answer any specific questions that you may have. But this is basically a housekeeping or a procedural matter in the adoption of this resolution and in the form of a commitment the town has to stormwater and its programs.
Thank you, Ben. Any questions or comments?
Go ahead, Tom.
Ben, are we the only municipality in the state that has gotten this slap on the hand?
That's a very good question, Commissioner Whitmer. The state auditors that were here 6 weeks ago made the comment because Barry and I were somewhat, just surprised by the notification. And they basically held our hands and said, do not lose sleep over this. This is nothing to lose sleep at this point in time. And there's no fines associated at this point in time. And every town that has been audited thus far in North Carolina, with the exception of one, has been found to be in violation or have deficiencies in their program. Now, when I say except one, that auditor that conducted the inspection of that one municipality is no longer a state employee. I don't have that number, but I would say scores are close to that.
I have one question.
Kitty?
With the comprehensive plan update, there's a lot of talk about stormwater and asking the public, to input about stormwater. But aren't we pretty set on what we're doing with stormwater and how much influence, can the public have now?
Well, it's still in the process, Ms. Commissioner, if you say. So I don't know how to actually answer that question because the new program is being developed as we speak.
But most of our ordinances come down from the federal to the state, to the county.
You're
and to us.
absolutely correct.
So we're pretty set on
Yes.
most everything.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It's pretty well, there's very little deviation from the EPA, from the federal level.
I think the best thing we're doing right now is making people aware of the stormwater importance and difficulty
Absolutely.
and the expense of it.
Yes, ma'am. That's correct.
Commissioner Blake, did you have a question?
Well, I just know, and I would say, having previously served on Planning and Zoning Commission, they've been doing a lot of work in the stormwater area too. So it's not like we've been not working on it. And in fact, that body has planned on this fall anyway, regardless of this audit before, taking a look at the stormwater ordinance and knowing it needed some updating, and primarily that's it. But I want to ask you, Ben, this indicates that we're going to have a revised draft stormwater management plan not later than October 25th. Is that correct?
Yes and no. That what the state will ask us, because obviously we would not have one completed by October. But the state will want a response from the town of Montreat that we are in the process of drafting that new stormwater policy.
But, well, this recital, whereas the town of Montreat acknowledges receipt of notice of violation, blah, blah, blah. And to develop a draft stormwater management plan to comply with the CFR permit requirements and submit the draft.
Yes, sir.
To North Carolina DEQ by 10/25.
That's
You're
correct.
saying we can't do that.
It'll be a draft copy, but it won't have all the details in it that would be required.
Okay. But do we have the resources to do that? Even
Yes.
if it's not complete
Oh,
and draft?
absolutely. Yes, sir.
Okay. Who's primarily going to be working on it in the town staff?
Barry
Okay,
and Mary Roderick.
okay. All right, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I'll entertain the motion as written.
I move that we approve resolution number 22-08-0001, affirming the town of Montreat Council support regarding implementation of a compliant NPDES MS4 stormwater program.
Have a motion from Mayor Pro Tem Whitmer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Otto. Further discussion and or questions? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes carry. Item C is consideration of a public hearing regarding closing and removing from dedication a portion of North Carolina Terrace. Who's going to cover that? Well, we just go to a public hearing. Floor is open. Have a motion to go to public hearing?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we go to open a public hearing.
Have a motion from Commissioner Otto to go into public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second from Commissioner Alexander. Discussion and or questions? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're now in the public hearing.
Hello? Can you guys hear me? Better? Okay, perfect. All right, good evening, Commissioners, Mayor. My name's Kayla DiChristina. I am Montreat Zoning Administrator. Tonight, I am going to be doing a very brief presentation on the right-of-way closure request for the portion of right-of-way in front of 300 and 304 North Carolina Terrace. Next slide, please. All right, I want to provide a quick overview of the application. The section of right-of-way proposed to be closed is adjacent to 300 and 304 North Carolina Terrace, south of the midline of the public right-of-way of North Carolina Terrace. The surrounding properties are zoned R2 medium density residential. The dimensional requirements are on the screen before you. The existing use of 304 North Carolina Terrace is a partially demolished house that encroaches into the public right-of-way. The existing use of 300 North Carolina Terrace is vacant, but a new single-family dwelling is proposed to be constructed there. As far as the right-of-way abandonment request goes, the property owner, who is also the applicant, requests that the Board of Commissioner approve an order closing the area of right-of-way along the frontage of 304 North Carolina Terrace, which is where the partially demolished house is that encroaches into the right-of-way, and along the frontage of 300 North Carolina Terrace, which is currently a vacant lot, so as to reduce the nonconformities created by the current location of the partially demolished house as it is partially in the right-of-way. I do want to note that only the right-of-way in front of 304 North Carolina Terrace needs to be closed in order to place the partially demolished house entirely within private property and out of the right-of-way. Next slide, please. On the slide before you, the red triangle, two triangle pieces, outlines the area for the potential right-of-way closure. You can see it's broken up into two tracks just for purposes of discussion. Tract 1 aligns with 304 North Carolina Terrace. You can see that the partially demolished house, with the addition of Tract 1 to 304 North Carolina Terrace, it would bring the partially demolished house within private property completely and out of the right-of-way. Doing that, allowing Tract 1 and 304 North Carolina Terrace to be joined would eliminate the nonconformity created from the house being constructed in the public right-of-way. Next slide, please. I want to touch just very briefly on the existing house encroachment. So the original footprint of the home on 304 North Carolina Terrace is estimated to have been built in the early 1900s, according to Buncombe County property records. Based on the two plats that are on the screen, the one on top is from 1898 and the bottom one is from 1906. These plats show the right-of-way and the individual lots. So it is my assumption, as well as Scott Adams, who is the previous zoning administrator, who began researching this case, it's our assumption that the home was built encroaching into the right-of-way of North Carolina Terrace. Next slide, please. So I want to quickly go over the process of right-of-way closure as outlined in the general statute NCGS 160A-299. So to begin the process, the Board of Commissioners shall first adopt a resolution declaring its intent to close the street or alley and to call a public hearing on the request. The Board of Commissioners adopted this resolution of intent at their July 14th meeting. A copy of that signed resolution should be in your packets. The resolution will then be advertised in accordance with the standard put on the screen, and I verified that staff completed that. Finally, the board shall hold a public hearing on the request where any person may be heard on the question of whether or not the closing of the street or alley is detrimental to the public interest, and that no individual owning property in the vicinity of the street or alley would be deprived of reasonable means of ingress or egress to their property. I know that was a lot of language, but I have that blown up on the next slide. Yes,
The
Commissioner
statute
Boyle.
also requires that a copy of the resolution be sent by registered or certified mail to all owners of property adjoining the street. Was that done? Did you confirm that?
Yes,
Okay.
that was done as well. Okay, should the board find number 3 to be true, the board may adopt an order closing the street or alley. A copy of that order should be within your packets. Following adoption of the order, a copy of the signed order is recorded with the Register of Deeds. Following recording of the signed order, all right, title, and interest in the right-of-way shall be conclusively presumed to be vested in the abutting landowners. There is not a requirement or need to record additional deeds of conveyance, as the title in the land after the street closure is vested with the recordation of the signed order. Next slide, please. So in summary, the Board of Commissioners may adopt an order closing the street or alley if it appears to the satisfaction of the board after the hearing that closing the street or alley is not contrary to the public interest, and if it appears to the satisfaction of the board after the hearing that no individual owning property in the vicinity of the street or alley in the subdivision in which it is located would thereby be deprived of reasonable means of ingress and egress to his property. That's all I have. I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions of Kayla? Or comments?
Kayla, do you have a recommendation for the board?
Well, it's my professional opinion that it's always in the best interest to reduce nonconformities. It allows us to work within the code, create more sustainable development. That would be the only professional opinion that I would offer. Yep.
That could be accomplished with vacating the right of way immediately in front of the residence.
Could you rewind 3 slides? Yes. You're talking about just tract 1 or tract
Yes, track
2?
that
Is true.
that benefit could be achieved by simply vacating track.
That is true. I will also note that with utility planning, it is beneficial to have smooth right-of-way lines or smooth property lines abutting the right-of-way. Some utilities, it's difficult to route them around sharp corners, so you may run into easements on private property or such. I will note that the order that you have within your packet does place a non-exclusive easement on tract 1 and 2, which would allow the town to construct any utilities as needed in both of those triangles.
Additional questions? Okay, Kayla.
Thank you.
Commissioners, does anyone else want to speak on this issue?
Mayor, Commissioners, my name is Ron Sneed. Some of you know me. I'm the town attorney for the town of Black Mountain. I've appeared before your board before over time. And I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Jones, who's requested this street closing. I think Taylor's done an excellent job of covering most of my job. But this came to you initially because that old house that's been there for 107 years, as near as we can tell, was built in the right of way. No doubt about it, after the recording of the plats in the 1890s. So the right of way existed before the house was built. However, with the passage of time, as some of you probably know, if that house was still standing, you certainly couldn't go tell the people to get it out of the right of way at that period of time. What Mr. Jones is trying to do is just get rid of that non-conformity. He would like to preserve some qualities of the old house, build on that footprint, and be in a little bit more in conformity with Montreat's laws and be outside the right of way. When he first started talking about removing the right of way, we were just talking about front of lot 304. And once I sketched that out and gave some sort of reasonable space between the encroaching footprint and the new proposed right of way, it created this jagged corner at the corner of what's now 304. It was my idea because I've worked for towns and counties and cities for over 40 years and planning departments. I'm also the development services attorney for Waynesville. That's just one of my separate jobs. Is, as Taylor said, rights of way that sort of jag in the middle create more heartache than help. And so that's the reason I cut that triangle, made it more of a smooth turn, sort of kind of roughly staying parallel to right away on the other side. I can spend a lot of time before you tonight, and I've got a full presentation that will wear you out. I don't think there's a need. If nothing is done tonight, as a matter of law, Mr. Jones would go and build the house back on the same footprint. He would like to be able to modify that some, probably when you start building, building standards. But there are qualities of the building he wants to preserve. And that's why he's asking for the change in the lot line by closing a part of the right of way. I will say, being a lawyer, when you pass the hat, put a plaque or something here to lay papers on, I'll donate. The 168-299, which Taylor references, the law, the statute that gives you the authority to close streets, portions of streets. And there's 4 things that you be able to do it. You have to find, first off, streets under the control of North Carolina Department of Transportation. We all know that's a city street, it's not the state street. And no property owner in the vicinity of the street will be deprived of reasonable access. I can hand out a copy of the plat that creates the right of way. I can give you a copy of the tax map, but I think all this board knows that North Carolina Terrace comes up through there and sort of dead ends at Assembly. And you also, when you look at the tax map, you see just about every lot is built out. It's built out. Everybody's coming and going and they're getting there. In the past, I've dealt in communities where you look at the street closing, what commissioners or the council want to know, where else might this road go? If there's 100 acres that might be developed in the future, we might want to keep all the width we can. We might need a 4-lane highway. Obviously, any development, expansion development here will have to be at the dining room assembly end. So that's not a question. So I think you've got a build out neighborhood, you've got an adequate road, you've got plenty of right of way. And even if we reduce this, scaling it, it looks like at the narrowest point, and there are other points narrower and along that road, North Carolina Terrace, it's about 45 feet. 45 feet is the standard for a state road, and that is not a thoroughfare. So even with closing that strip, you'll have added right of way. The closing is not going to be detrimental to the public interest because if you change the lot line and expand it, me driving up and down the road will never know the difference. You will look at the map that Taylor showed you, And our front setback may still not be completely met on the front of that house, even with a new lot line. That means no way can the house ever be closer than the existing footprint. That is the protection for the neighborhood, that the look and feel of that lot is not going to change if they drive up and down the road. If there's any public interest, is to look at your neighborhood, and I think that's met.
Ron, could you just explain that one more time? I got lost on why it couldn't be built out to that line.
The front setback, I think Kayla showed to be 20 feet. And the front lot line that we've requested that would be created with the closing of the street, if it may not be 20 feet from the front edge of that building. That means it will still be non-compliant as far as setbacks goes, meaning he can build on the footprint, but he can never come closer to the street or those new right of way than he is right now. That's the guarantee to the neighborhood that he won't build a house that's going to come up the street and be in their face. He can't come forward to where he is now. If the board like, I have photographs that were taken from the street. You can barely see this house in summer because it sits down a little bit from the road, pretty well camouflaged. And part of it's gone right now, so it's even more camouflaged. So that what we would ask of the board is to close the street as we have recommended or requested, because first off, it removed encroachment into your street, the location of the new lot line, put the house on land that the owner owns. Put the location footprint will keep it from ever coming any closer to the street than it is right now, where it's not very visible. And to close in front of both of the lots will give you a regular right-of-way line that won't be a problem in the future for people like Taylor said, for utilities, but for property owners. You're walking along the edge of a right-of-way and all of a sudden you got to turn left and walk 20 feet, then turn right, stay with right-of-way. Made a little sense to us. So we're asking of you that you follow the curve basically that we create. I can, if it's helpful to the board, or commission, I'm going to stop here. I think most of you know the neighborhood. I don't know that you need pictures to see that if you drive down North Carolina Terrace right now, you'll have to stop and look to find this house because it sits down and in Greenman. You know that if we can't get closer than that, there's not much we can do. It's going to increase visibility to the neighborhood. So their view won't change, their neighborhood won't change. And the nature of the house, one thing that I'm not qualified to testify to, I may ask Terry to talk about is why does he want to preserve any of this house? It would be so much easier for Harry Jones to go up there and tell some of the bulldozers, just get it out of here. I'm moving back on the lot, building a bigger house. But I'm going to give Harry a minute to tell you the value of retaining some of this house. I may.
Yeah, it's still open, Kayla.
I failed to mention in my presentation that we did receive multiple letters of support of this application. They should be within your packets.
Some of them refer to the building as historic. It looked like a wreck to me, Harry.
About the letters of recommendation that are in your folder. Of course, I told Harry there were 5 letters of recommendation, one that asked to be drawn in quarter, and I had to boost him a little bit.
Thank you, Councilman. Next.
When we started talking thank you for letting me be here tonight, by the way, and thank you for your service. When we started, is that okay? Harry T. Jones, 300 North Carolina Terrace in Montreat. When we started talking to neighbors about this, they're all ready for that dilapidated structure to come down. And we found a couple of them that shared stories with us that we found were interesting. Of course, this already been mentioned, home was built in 1915, but it was built before Anderson Auditorium was built in the 1920s. So it's been around a while. That's according to Les Davis, the former owner, said this home is in the book on the historic homes of Montreat. Beth O'Shea, whose home is across the street from 304, said, my great grandmother built that house. She was Susan Willard Chester, married to Samuel Hall Chester. Anybody ever heard of Samuel Hall Chester? He was the executive secretary to the Presbyterian Board of World Missions, and said you could find out a lot more information at the Presbyterian Heritage Center. She further said the house was originally called Bethany, and the marble floors are from the inn. The marble floors are in the stone kitchen that we'd like to preserve. The stone kitchen and apartment were added by the Chesters, according to Les Davis, former owner. Beth's mother, Mrs. McCarley, told Les stories about scrounging the scrap piles of stone from either Assembly Inn or Anderson Auditorium during their renovation construction to get the marble and stone for the stone kitchen. So recycling, reuse came early to Montreat. That the stone kitchen is built on the right of way that we're asking to be abandoned or to be closed. So Tom and Mary Bailey Davis bought the home in 1956. Their children include Les, Murphy, and another sister. And another neighbor, when asked about what they thought about the property, said, "I certainly have no objection to this. Indeed, in an ideal world, I'd like to have the whole house be rebuilt as it was. I have such fond memories of sitting in the kitchen of that house as a child, and of Mary Bailey and Tom Davis, not to mention their daughter Murphy, who you might know died a couple of years ago after a life of extraordinary service." So this is from another neighbor who's a lifetime Montreater. So there's history there we would like to preserve, the stone kitchen. Do you want me to go through the photographs now, or is that enough?
Harry, the main point is why you want to close it and the legality of closing it. I think that's what the commission wants to hear. Okay.
Harry T, you're going to tear this house down, right?
We
You're gonna
plan to
tear the house
the
down.
dilapidated portion of the house. The house sits just as we bought it.
What is not dilapidated? I went up there and looked at it.
What is not dilapidated?
Yeah. I mean,
Well-
what do you intend to preserve?
Let me show you.
Just the kitchen or more?
There's a stone kitchen
Yeah.
that we would like to preserve.
And is that the only part of the house you're going to preserve?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you going to keep this piece of property or sell it or build on it? Or what are you going to do with it? Is your intention?
We have several parties interested in buying the property, including some family members that have just surfaced this week. So we'd like to tear it down and clean up the neighborhood. See if we can make that stone kitchen into a safe place to, I don't know, it'd be grandchildren, place for our grandchildren or what, but that's what we plan to do right now, and then make it available for somebody else. I've built all the house I want to build, somebody else to build at that property in the future. Our suggestion is, our preference is to build on the existing footprint as least disruptive place to rebuild.
Has a potential buyer expressed an interest in redoing that kitchen?
No, ma'am. But they've not expressed a preference either way.
Other questions of Harry? All right, Harry, you
So,
got anything
yeah,
else?
I've
B?
been to the property multiple times, looked, and I've tried to look at the plat there. Just for the record there, and I understand where you're going with the preservation of the kitchen. But could you not, if this was denied, drop back and put a nice house within the ordinance that we have, meeting the setbacks front and side, and come up with a house of good proportion there? Could that not be done?
You
as
could,
that-
yes, you could do that.
Okay. Again, you're losing the kitchen, but that lot supports a house if.
And I have not measured that off, but yes, you could build a large house on that.
Yeah,
lot.
I think you can get about a 50-foot frontage and about a 60-foot drop back, I believe.
You may have measured it off.
No,
I have
was-
not.
I was spitballing it, but that was kind of what I was assuming there. Okay.
So if you preserve the kitchen, does the ordinance allow you to build back that footprint if it's attached to that kitchen?
It's my understanding that we can rebuild on the existing footprint. We're trying to go about this and clean it up. So that's what Mrs. Sneed had said earlier. We're trying to work this and clean up the nonconformity, I think they call it.
But if you tore down the kitchen, then you would have to move back. Setbacks would
That's
make you
what
move
Mr.
back.
Adams told us. Well, he said if we took the whole thing down, but
Non-conforming structures are structures that were built. We've got two types. Typically, a legally non-conforming structure is one that's built and it's legal at the time, and then you change setbacks, for instance, to make it non-conforming. This structure is a little bit different because it wasn't legally non-conforming. It was just non-conforming. It sat over the property line. However, it sat over the property line for 100 years. That means if you do nothing tonight and deny the request, Harry Jones can build a house back on that footprint right now. We're trying to get away. That's not the thing Harry wants to do for his neighborhood. His goal is to preserve at least the old stone kitchen and to remove this problem of a house sitting in a right of way and just clean it up legally on the ground, preserve the ability to build on the footprint and be done, leaving a better, even if he sells it, leave a better condition that he bought into.
Can I just ask a question? On what basis could he rebuild on property he doesn't own? Because that's not a non-conforming use under the zoning ordinance. That's
There-
property he doesn't own, and in my understanding, and I don't know North Carolina law, but under Florida law, adverse possession cannot be claimed against the sovereign.
It
So
30 years.
against the sovereign in North Carolina?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, sovereign North Carolina's not involved. It's the
It's
town of
Town of
Montreat.
Montreat.
But the owner of that underlying dirt is Mount Retreat Association. And so the town maintain the street, has the right to the use of the easement. Mount Retreat Association still owns the dirt under that easement. And you can adversely possess from local government in 30 years, longer than the 20 against me. But we're adversely possessing one, to cut off an easement, which you can do. You can obstruct an easement for 20 years in a day, and that easement disappears. You can build on another individual's property. Mountain Retreat Associations stay there for more than 20 years, and you can adversely possess against them. It is possible under the law to terminate that easement or obstruct that easement long enough that the town can't make you come and unobstruct the easement. For that reason, he would be able to build back on the footprint right now.
Okay.
It's,
You don't think
it's
it's
muddy law. I
abandon
agree.
that right by allowing the house to disintegrate entirely? I think you've got a nice lawsuit. But that's just me.
I'll take that.
Okay.
No, actually, you're hitting on a point of law that I'm really familiar with because a few years ago, there was a couple of cases in the Court of Appeals about this easement that was obstructed, was blocked by an individual. And the first round, the Court of Appeals said 6 years. And you can't run me out of your easement anymore. The Supreme Court took it back up to 20 years. But you can obstruct, you can win against the king and it's obstructing or taking use of a public right. It is doable. And there's some recent legislation that's, and we guys are trying to do in the town government under this state legislature. You know that your abilities are being removed every day and taken back to the state or obstructed somewhere to the state. The state has now imposed on you a statute of limitations on enforced the zoning ordinance. So yes, I would take that case. The area is right to continue to build the right way. I think the law is in my favor and the twin of the law would be in his favor. But we're not threatening to do that. We're just trying to fix this problem.
Any other questions of Counselor Sneed or Harry Jones or?
Can I ask Barry to give any input on, since it's close to the road, does this affect anything?
This doesn't affect anything except for, you know, the homeowner needs to be aware of the drainage in that area. There's a pretty steep ravine that catches quite a bit of water. You know, that'll have to be figured in later, but the water line and the utilities in that area are in really good shape. We should get many, many years out of that. Nothing that I'm aware of.
Could you also comment on both Kayla's and Mr. Sneed's comment about the jagged right of way that would occur if track number 2, which is the track in front of 300 in that 304, is that problematic in the future for utilities, as Kayla and Mr. Sneed had indicated?
The only thing that I would see was maybe with MSD, but like I say, I'm not familiar with how the sewer is down through there. But like I say, our utilities are out in the center of the road. And the storm drainage for us is down in that ravine or right in that swell of the road, that lower spot. So the upper part.
So if there's a jagged edge there, that's not going to cause you any problems.
I don't see any way that we would be putting a utility down off over that bank, because you leave the road edge and it's probably like a 4 or 5 foot shoulder. And then it just drops off pretty steep. So
Okay.
personally, I wouldn't be putting any utilities over. I like to keep it in the roadway.
That storm drain, Barry, does it dump all the water on that property?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Years ago, when we put that storm drain system in, it drops down right towards the porch at the end of the house. And that's the only place it can go. It's an actual ravine for the stormwater.
Okay.
So it catches a lot of water from above West Virginia on up towards the Harmony tank around that way. All that flows down.
Okay.
It's a lot of water.
All right. Thank you. As long as they're aware of that. Any other questions? Any other comments from the public? It is a public hearing. Hearing none, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I move we close public hearing.
Have a motion from Commissioner Alexander. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second from Commissioner Blake. Item D is to consider closing and removing from dedication a portion of North Carolina Terrace. And there is a recommended motion there that's either approving or denying.
Mayor, you'll need to vote on the motion to close the public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ben. Angela, what would I do without you? Do I have a motion to have a motion and a second? Do I have a vote? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Yeah, I got there anyway, Ben. Okay, item D, consideration of closing or removing dedication a portion of North Carolina Terrace. Ben, you and Kayla don't need to say any more about that, do you? Kayla shaking her head.
Nothing further.
Okay. Commissioners, you've heard the public comments, so now is your time to consider this. Do I have a motion? Need a motion to open discussion. If we don't have a motion, the issue fails.
I'll move to approve the closing and removing from dedication a portion of North Carolina Terrace.
Have a motion from Mayor Pro Tem Whitmer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second from Commissioner Blake. All those in favor of the motion?
I'd like to discuss the motion.
To discuss the issue or the motion, we've got to have a vote to, it's either got to be approve or deny before we can put it on the floor for discussion.
No.
Correct. We get the motion, a second, make a big discussion for the vote. Once there's a vote, it's too late for discussion.
Okay, you're right. Absolutely right. I'm sorry.
Sorry, no, it's.
Go ahead.
Well, I second it for the purpose of discussion. I think Tom probably made the motion for purpose of discussion. I salute Harry in his efforts to preserve this historic house and to make that possible. And therefore, I can fully support abandoning, or that's what we call it in Florida, and it's a different word here, but closing the right of way. It's essentially the same thing in Florida. The right of way for the lot on which the house stands. And I think that will help solve that whole problem, make that lot rebuildable, deal with that eyesore, et cetera. And that's great. But the balance of the property, I've got a problem. It's public property. And it's not anything we have to do to solve the problem. So we're just giving away public property for no reason other than a sense of neatness. I need more than a sense of neatness to give away public property. There's nothing been demonstrated here that leaving the right-of-way line jagged, as they may want to call it, creates any problem whatsoever. And my concern is that it creates a precedent that just somebody finds some right-of-way that's not being used. Well, let's come in and ask the town council for it. That's not, we're in the business of being stewards of the town property, not just sort of letting it go for no reason whatsoever. And we don't know. We can't tell the future. We don't know when the town might or might not need this in the future. It doesn't need it today. It's not practical today. But to give it away for nothing, for no reason other than a sense of neatness, is not anything I can support.
Thank you, Commissioner Blake. Other comments?
Commissioner Blake, could that be cleaned up with just using the track one portion of that? Is that what you're?
Yes,
So I
I'm
understand.
saying I would support a motion, an amendment to the motion, which granted it only with respect to track one.
Track one, which is directly in front of the structure.
That's correct, which will accomplish everything that Mr. Sneed and Mr. Jones said they wanted to do. So it does everything they want to do without giving away property for no reason.
And I would concur with just about everything you said there. I do think as a council to be giving away property and setting precedents there is a little tricky. I do look at that property though, and a lot of town or property owners here, I like to see folks be able to work and get things accomplished and built on their properties. And so it's a little tricky here when I have been on that property and again, my best assessment is it looks like a buildable lot if things are dropped back. Again, I can appreciate the fact that we're trying to preserve part of that kitchen there. So I think I would if there was an amendment, if there was a way that could be broken out, I could consider that front portion of the track one piece. I could probably get my mind around it a little bit more from that standpoint.
Other comments? If the motion to approve fails, then I can entertain a motion for track one, can I? Okay. There's a motion on the floor to approve the closing and removing from dedication a portion of North Carolina Terrace, which includes track 1 and 2. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes fail, noes carry. Now I'll entertain a motion referring to track 1. Same motion, just track 1.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution modifying the legal description to conform only with that portion thereof identified on the drawing as track 1.
Have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Have a second from Commissioner Otto. Further discussion? And or questions? All those in favor of the motion to approve the closing of track 1 on North Carolina Terrace signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes carry. Item E is consideration of revisions and additions of ordinances relating to the bear hunting dog ordinance. Commissioner Blake presentation.
Yes, Commissioner Whitmer and I have been working on a series of measures to address the situation that we encountered at the end of the last hunting season here in Montreat, in which we had several instances of hunting dogs being run through residential neighborhoods in Montreat. One incident endangering some young children who were packing their belongings, getting ready to leave after a vacation here. The actions we have, and I prepared and circulated a memo summarizing 4 different types of actions that we are recommending. One of which are some ordinances that I would like to offer tonight. The second is a public information and involvement campaign. The third is improved police preparedness and response. And lastly, communicating with the local bear hunting organizations. And we have throughout this process been in contact with Jim Gibbs. And in fact, I met with him just a week ago, actually. I believe it was August the 5th, in a phone conference with Jim Gibbs, discussing all the ordinances that we're concerning tonight. I'd like to start by asking for consideration of the ordinances. We have revisions to one ordinance, and we have several new ordinances. The first ordinance is a revision to the existing dog control ordinance. And essentially the revisions we are making are to the penalty provisions in that ordinance. As we've discussed before, the existing dog control ordinance defaults to a penalty provision that's applicable to all town ordinances. And in those ordinances, some are, very minor and require only minor penalties. But the existence of the dog situation we've had are serious, dangerous public threats to public safety, particularly the safety of our children in Montreat. And we don't believe those penalties, I do not believe those penalties are adequate. In particular, those penalties for any violation of the ordinance right now, if you came in with a pack of 1,000 dogs, it would be first a verbal warning, second time a written warning, and only on the third violation would there even be a penalty for running dogs loose in Montreat. What I've tried to do in crafting the revision to this ordinance is to make it specific so that we're only penalizing the behaviors that we frankly need to protect the public from. And so what we didn't do in this ordinance is make frankly any change to what happens when you've got a single dog that's loose. So if you've just simply got one dog that's loose, and if Jack gets loose, okay, then you get a verbal warning, and then you get a written warning, and then finally you get a fine. But if you've got 2 or more dogs, that's a different situation, and that's But still, we wanted to make sure we only penalized or increase the penalties where we were attacking just what we were afraid of. So if you've got 2 or more dogs loose in a non-residential area, there's still no change in the ordinance. You still get a verbal warning, you still get a written warning, et cetera. So if you've got 2 dogs and you're up on a path, you're on Rainbow Trail and you let 2 dogs loose and you get caught, you get a warning. Now, so what we have changed is if you've got 2 dogs loose in a residential area in Montreat, we've increased we've increased the penalties. And what we've done is we've said that the penalties for the first violation are 200, which is the existing penalty when you finally get to a penalty is $250. We said it's $250 for each dog involved in a violation. And second subsequent violations, $500 for each dog. That's also the same thing for the fourth and subsequent after if you just 1 dog and you get past the warnings. So we haven't changed the penalty amount, just that you get no warnings when you're a residential area in Montreat with more than 1 dog, and we make the penalties on a per dog basis. I understand that the hunting camp crew have some concerns. Frankly, Jim Gibbs, when I last talked with him, didn't express concern about this penalty, but I'll accept the fact that he's thought about it between now and then. But I'll just tell you, if they've admitted that they're going to break the law in Montreat, that's fine. They'll pay the penalty just like anybody else. You're free to speed in Montreat. You're free to get a ticket. It's only $200 if you're speeding in Montreat and get a ticket. If you're running multiple dogs in Montreat without children around, it ought to be more than a traffic ticket. That's my opinion anyway. And I hope the commission believes the same. I've made a few other changes to this ordinance. Most of them are housekeeping, in the sense that apparently when this ordinance was adopted, Black Mountain had a temporary impoundment situation, and they don't anymore. The county's the only people that impound, and so we made some changes there. I made a change though that the Jim Gibbs of the hunting club did request. At his request, I made a change that when we get a dog taken into custody, provided that there's contact information, if it's reasonably possible under the circumstances, we'll try to contact the owner before we take it to the impoundment. That way, we're not impounding the hunt club's dogs without giving them a chance to cooperate with us. So those are the changes to the existing dog control ordinance, which is Article 3 of Chapter 1 of the current Code of General Ordinances. There is a new ordinance that we have proposed, a new trespass ordinance, which tracks the North Carolina Landowners Protection Act, which is about a 10-year-old act that was passed to basically protect landowners from hunting here in North Carolina when they were trying to prohibit people from hunting on their property. And essentially what we basically say is that if you go on someone else's land in Montreat, again, being as narrow as possible in a residential area, doesn't mean you can't go get your dogs if the hunt club loses its dogs and they're up in the MRA's territory. As long as the MRA has given them permission, it's fine. This isn't even going to penalize them if the MRA hasn't given them permission. But when you come in our residential neighborhoods, you're not entitled to go on somebody else's land without their permission, unless there is, and I initially had another exception in addition to permission, if there was a Montreat police officer present. Jim Gibbs, when I last met with him, did have a request to change this ordinance, and I'm willing to make that change, and it put it in bold brackets in the ordinance that I circulated, which simply indicates that rather than the police being present, because it may be there may only be one policeman and he's got something else to do. But that if the police department was at least notified that the person was, and this is where I sort of, frankly, Jonathan, Mr. Smith, don't understand your comment tonight because again, when I spoke to Jim Gibbs on the 5th of August, he had no objection to the notification. And in addition, really asked this request, which is asked for this change, which assumed was notification. In fact, what Jim Gibbs told me, Jonathan, was that this was not a problem. And he actually said this particular notification ordinance was not a problem in our last public, in our last meeting on it. So I don't know where the miscommunication comes from, but what we've tried to do here, if we take the language I thought Mr. Gibbs wanted, was to create an exception or that there is no trespass if the police department is notified as they're required to notify. And the reason, and we'll get to the notification earlier, but the reason is the notification gives the police a chance to be there to respond to the situation, to have warning that they've got a potentially dangerous situation that they can go to. That change again would make it a trespass to go on someone else's property unless you've got, if you're in a residential neighborhood in Montreat, unless you've either got their permission or you've called the police and tell them you're in Montreat looking for your dogs that are loose. And if you're not willing to call the police and tell them your dogs are loose in Montreat in our residential neighborhoods, then you're guilty of a trespass when you go on someone else's property without their consent, if this ordinance is passed. The third ordinance is.
Mason, before we leave that, in that ordinance under Article 6, Section 1, trespass, the requirement of the police officer being present is still there.
That would be deleted and the bracketed bold language, which
Would
is
be
another
inserted.
clause
Okay.
2 would be inserted in its place.
All
And
right.
yeah, and Chief Arent had some concerns about the police officer being present just because he knew that may not be possible in each case. So it's not perfect. I mean, frankly, if I had my druthers, I just have, they permission or they can't go. And let me just say that it's still trespass if you go on somebody's property without their permission. It's just not a criminal violation. It's not a violation of local ordinance. You're still liable for trespass, civil trespass. But so we're not, but at least this makes it a criminal trespass if you go on somebody else's property without their permission, unless you've told the police, that you've allowed Montreat, you've allowed your dogs to come into Montreat and in a residential neighborhood, and that the police need to respond to that public safety situation. The third ordinance is for the release is a prohibition against the release of hunting dogs. This just simply prevents somebody from turning or allowing their hunting dogs to get loose while they're in the city of Montreat. So it prohibits exactly the kind of behavior we encountered, where we literally had people letting hunting dog loose out of trucks in the city of Montreat. The fourth is the notice requirement. Again, Mr. Gibbs, when I talked to him, had no problem with the notice requirement, said it would not be a problem for them to comply with the notice requirement. All we're asking is, and let me, in case any of you were not here at the public hearing, these hunters know where their dogs are. They have sophisticated Garmin equipment. They know when the dogs are crossing. They literally know when the dogs are crossing the town line. They can, I think some of this, they can actually see the lot lines. They know exactly where their dogs are, and they know when they get notice. According to Mr. Gibbs, there are only about a half a dozen, I believe. I'm just going by my recollection, people that own most of the dogs up there, and all those people can be keyed in, have the number, be able to easily call the town and report when their dogs are heading into Montreat. And again, we're only requesting notice if it looks like they're coming in our residential neighborhoods. We're not trying to create extra work for them, but if their dogs are headed our way, we want to know. The last ordinance is addresses a situation that we've encountered. Everybody to blame here are not the hunters. This problem is so we got a four-legged stool, as Tom likes to call it, with everybody, we got a lot of responsibility. We got to do a lot of education. There's a lot more to do than just these ordinances. But one of the problems, we've got to behave ourselves. We've got to enforce our trash and garbage disposal regulations so that we're not feeding the bears basically by putting the trash out the day before trash collection in non-bear proof containers. We've got to not feed the bears. Apparently we have people feeding bears in Montreat. This is a dangerous situation that creates a public safety hazard for all of us here in Montreat. It cannot be allowed. You can't go in the Smoky Mountains National Park and feed bears without risking a fine. It's a fine up to $2,000 feeding bears in Smoky Mountain National Park. It ought to be prohibited in the town of Montreat. I just can't imagine why we shouldn't. And I believe from a public safety standpoint, we should. And so the last ordinance I am proposing is an ordinance which prohibits feeding bears intentionally. And it also prohibits feeding bears by failing to properly dispose of garbage. It does indicate that if you incidentally feed bears when you're trying to accomplish something else, so that if you put your bird feeder out specifically as an example, and the bear gets in your bird feeder, you're not violating that ordinance. Again, we're not trying to get at unintentional violations, but we are trying to clearly prohibit people from creating a dangerous situation by feeding bears here in Montreat. So that's a summary of the ordinance changes that and new ordinances that I'm proposing. I'm available to answer any questions that, and I'll make one other comment. Earlier drafts of these ordinances, I had made the change. Basically, the North Carolina State Legislature recently required all municipalities used to impose class two misdemeanor penalties. The new law says all you can do for municipalities class 3 misdemeanor penalties. I made all those changes, but I forgot that class 3 misdemeanors have different penalty limits. And so I reviewed these. I had the district attorney, Todd Williamson, review these ordinances. He got back to me, thankfully late today, and finally after many bugging him, and he indicated he picked up the fact that although I had them as class 3 misdemeanors, the maximum fine instead of 500 is 200. So I've made that change in every place. The maximum penalty in terms of imprisonment is 20 days rather than 60 days. I had that right 3 out of 4 places, but I made the change in the 4th place. So that's it. And I'm available to answer any questions regarding these ordinances. Again, let me say they were intended to be drafted as narrowly as possible to be as accommodating to the Mount Mitchell Bear Hunting Club as we could possibly be. And in all fairness to them, but in fairness to our folks, we just have to have an ordinance we can enforce when whoever comes down here running hunting dogs in a residential neighborhood, they're going to get a penalty. That's the way we'll keep it from happening.
Thank you, Commissioner Blake, for all the hard work and your presentation. Good job. Any questions of Commissioner Blake? Any comments from the commissioners?
Yes. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Well, I really appreciate the time that Mr. Commissioner Whitmer and Commissioner Blake have put into this. And I know they've talked to each of us individually about different parts. And I also like the education of the people of our community. And I think that's going to be one of the most positive parts of this
So, yeah, again, I agree. Thank you. Thank you for, it looks like hours of work that you put into this, and I appreciate the fact that you being here tonight, Mr. Smith, and again, we're trying to build relationship and some understanding on this topic. So a couple of things, the no release in town, that's an easy thing for me to get behind. Notifying the police that you're coming in to retrieve dogs. I think, again, I like the fact that the officer doesn't have to be there, but to reach out and say, hey, we're coming into town. And generally speaking, I would think y'all know that they're coming over the ridge line. I can get behind that. No feeding the bears. I can get behind that. And then here's where it gets a little tricky for me, and I need a little bit of clarification. So they contact the police, said, hey, we're coming to retrieve dogs. So we'll start with this one. The dogs are in town. Okay. First, is it just, hey, I'm coming to get the dogs and it's open. They don't have to specify the property. They're just open to come into town and retrieve their dogs. Is that correct? Or do they have to say, I'm moving on to the auto property? How specific do they have to be in notifying the police?
They basically got to give the general location they believe the dogs are headed.
Okay.
Again, so that the police have an idea of where they need to respond to. And the idea is not, and we all know this is, in real time. So whatever information they give at the time is going to be different when the police get there. So
You're right. And I've seen them. I've seen them run down Tennessee across the Pratt's property and up, and then they take a left, and then they're on West Virginia before you can, make a phone call to your neighbor on that thing. So I want to give them freedom and to be able to do that. And that's kind of why, in sense, it makes sense to me that it's a little bit broader in there. But then I guess the other part that I'm struggling with, if they call, said, hey, our dogs have come over, and in fact, we know where they are. They're on Tennessee Road. They have treed a bear. So we've got 6 dogs there. My question there is they've contacted the police. They're coming to retrieve their dogs. Are they going to be penalized the $200 or whatever the fee is when they come to get their 6 dogs?
yes.
And see, I struggle with that, and I understand the danger, and especially as we talk about children or adults or whatever. But I see the danger, potentially with the dogs. I see the danger with the bears, but I also know this bear population is increasing, and I'm thinking, again, my opinion is we need to have some type of give and take on supporting the bear hunters, trying to discourage them here. But I just find it, I'm thinking, well, why in the heck am I going to notify you? Because I just rung up $200 fine.
Oh, that's true. But you'd better have well, I'll just tell you, I'd rather have no notification, Kent, because because you're going to have hunters. You're going to have hunters who will run their dogs intentionally through Montreat and call you to say, they're there just to get, they'll use it the wrong way. In other words, they will use that notice as a defense. They will take advantage of it. So better no notice, frankly, and to penalize them when they're here. But then that gets away of, again, it is a penalty. It is an excuse from a trespass standpoint. Okay. So that if they do give the notice, they're not guilty of a trespass penalty, but you have to control your dog in Montreat. Everybody lives by that. And, whether they notify us or not, it's a violation of our dog control ordinance. I don't know how you not make it, and preserve public safety. So I'd rather do without the notice at all, because I can tell you that gentleman that was quoted in the Black Mountain paper, who in the paper claimed he didn't release a dog in Montreat when he admitted to Tom and I on the phone he had. He will use that in just that way. And sort of as I explained these to him, he was almost excited about it because he thought he could use that as an excuse to run his dogs in here without any penalty. Because, oh yeah, I'll give the notice.
And again, are there, no, are there some bad bear hunters out there? Absolutely, as there is with any sporting, or, you know, there's just always a bad apple in a group. That being said, I still struggle with the fact of having something where I'm hoping 80–90% of the bear hunters are trying to abide by the law, but we're going to slap them in the hand, you know, a pretty stiff penalty when in some aspects they're providing a public service. You know, so again, I still have struggled with putting so much teeth in it so early on. Again, based off of my 15 years of experience up here, I would still like to allow them to have a season to see how much policing they can do on their own versus us coming right in with, you know, right out of the gate with a fine.
I understand. We, you know, and I respect you, you're my good friend, but we just disagree.
Sure.
I just think we gotta to pass something, and it may not be perfect and we may need to adjust it. But I think we need to do something now. But again, only in the context, let me say, of all the other things that we're looking at doing, one of which I know we talked about a little bit is the whole garbage situation. That's an important part. And as you look in the outline, you know, I mentioned one of the things is one of the, you know, there's no one solution here. There's a lot of different things we need to work on, including public education and involvement. But another is we've got to deal with the garbage situation better than we're dealing now, because we've got people, as you know, who are leaving Montreat. It's not a collection day. They've got 15 bags of garbage and they don't have anything they can do with it, or they don't know what they can do with it or how to deal with it. And how can we expect them not to leave it out on the road if we don't give them an identifiable alternative that they can, that they can utilize? So there's a lot of different things we need to deal with here, but the bottom line is I do believe we need to have these ordinances, but I'd rather do without the notification than to simply not penalize somebody. Is I think I've explained to some of the commissioners in 1901, we had our first dog control ordinance. The first set of ordinances the town of Montreat passed was in 1901. The penalty was, one, a fine that was equivalent to $350 today. Two, shoot the dog. It's real simple. And you didn't have that problem with that dog again. So we're not asking to shoot the dog, but we're not asking for a whole lot more money than $350 a dog.
Other comments or questions?
Kent made me aware of the fact I had not thought about the fact that if you notify the police, then you get the fine. Is Dave going to be responsible for turning in, you know, if somebody notifies him and say, I have 5 dogs, then he has to fine them for 5 dogs right then?
No, he doesn't. He'd have to actually, the police would have to actually apprehend the bear hunters with the 5 dogs in Montreat and determine it was appropriate to issue a citation at that time for them being loose in Montreat.
I think if I was a bear hunter, I would say, let's not notify anybody and see if I can sneak in there and get my dogs. Because
they
if
may
they
do that.
notify them, then they're going to get fined.
And if they're caught, then they'll be guilty of their dogs being loose in Montreat, and they'll be guilty of failing to notify. You know, if that's causing a problem, let's do away with the notification. And we can, and that would eliminate the notification as an excuse for trespassing. Again, it's not perfect. Nothing you're gonna do here is perfect, but I would rather do away with the notification than simply say, well, that gives, if they notify us, then we're not gonna fine them. Because that's just giving anybody the excuse when they're planning on running their dogs into Montreat to just make a phone call and they're scot-free. We might as well, I mean, we're really actually creating a hazard if that's where we're gonna go. I just soon withdraw the notification.
I'd be for that.
And I can support everything but the fines at this moment. If I saw that, again, it's abused, then I would probably be the first to jump on it the first of the year after bear season and say, you know something? They thumbed their nose at it. We had multiple events. I could look into it, but I still feel like as we're continuing to build a relationship there, I would put the burden back on the Bear Club to say, no, that blatant, we're gonna run our dogs through Montreat. I hope it's not going on. So, that, again, that fine at this moment is a sticking point for me.
The only, I hear what you're saying. And it's too bad we couldn't come up with some system to try something the first year. But when Mason and I were talking to that fellow who objected to the story in the Black Mountain News, you talk, as Jonathan probably knows him, because he said he used to be up there, and you talk about a rogue. He is a rogue. I mean, he actually told us, Mason and me on the phone, that I let my dogs out in Montreat. And so there's the hunters in the Bear Club, and then there are the rogue hunters. And if we let them all go that first year, we're just going to see that fella back over here again. And part of what we're trying to do with the ordinances, and particularly with the public communications campaign, is to not only inform and educate our own community, but also to let the outsiders know. That's why there are significant steps in the plan for newspaper articles, stories, other interviews, Facebook posts, and other things beyond just us talking to our own residents. And hopefully that would scare them enough that they wouldn't come on property. So I don't know. I hear what you're saying there, and you're both right. It's not a perfect situation.
Any other comment?
The only other comment I have, Mason, on the feeding ordinance is, are we saying that whoever does that is who puts garbage out, and the bears come and hit it, and the police drive by and see it, and it's a renter from Florida whose instructions on the rental sheet says that there's a Monday and a Friday pickup, and they put it out on Friday and there is no pickup. They're liable. Is that correct? Not the owner of that rental house?
That's correct. In other words, they, if somebody puts out garbage and it's not a collection day, the way this is drafted, it's, yes, I mean, it's a violation of the ordinance already. It's already a requirement. But
Yeah.
what this does is if they're putting it in an area where bears are and the bears tear it up, yeah, there's a fine.
Well, the example I used was that same house that Kent talked about, seeing those 21 bags of trash out. This was not, this was a different renter. And the instructions that they had were not only erroneous, but not very complete. So some of that burden falls on the owner of the house.
Some of that burden falls on us to notify people who rent homes that what day's garbage is picked up, because some of them do post it. And there was one up on either Peeps or Providence that had the same problem. And Angie, I think you called the owner, she called the rental company on that and let them know.
We need to add that to the communications piece.
Yeah,
And Commissioner Blake, just, excuse me, sorry.
go ahead.
Just one other, again, I appreciate all the work and I think we're all trying to correct this. And again, I don't know what the perfect answer is, but as I'm sitting here thinking about, because I've seen it occur and I'm wondering if we say, all right, gentlemen, $200 per dog, and they're watching their dogs and like, daggone it, my dogs are in Montreat running. Could we also be causing a situation where the bear hunter says, you know something, I'm gonna let them run right through Montreat. I'll get them on the other side, but I'll be daggone if I'm going down there and getting $1,000 fine on my 5 dogs. I'm just trying to think through, because when the dogs are down here, I want those bear hunters to get them out ASAP. And again, I'm afraid if they're zigzagging along the lot lines, they're like, I'm not driving into Montreat. I'll hope they'll come back over the ridge line. It's just a thought. And I'm not sure how, perfectly that works, but
I think they're gonna come try to, if their dogs are, I don't know how they follow their dogs effectively. Maybe they can get from here to the reservoir area over there and not go through Montreat after their dogs. I don't know that you can drive around.
Yeah.
But again, if the dogs are here, certainly we want them to get their dogs out of here. That's one of the reasons why we have again, made the change to the trespass ordinance so that it's no longer a trespass. But if the dogs are loose in a residential area, there's just in my opinion, got to be a significant penalty in order to make them do their best to keep them out of a residential area. And if once in a while there's a fine, then there's a fine. The world keeps turning. That's all I can say. The world keeps turning, but I do know this. I will disagree with this, Ken. I think if we do nothing, I'm afraid we'll have a continued problem. And I sure don't want to tell the citizens of Montreat we didn't have warning and didn't address it. And I think we've got a duty I believe I have a duty as a commissioner to address it from a public safety standpoint. I realize where you're coming from, and I know you're just as concerned about public safety. But I think passing the ordinance now is a better way to approach it. And again, if the notification is causing heartburn, then let's do away with the notification. I want them to know that if their dogs are loose in Montreat, they're going to get fined. But I prefer to leave the notification in. I realize it's not perfect.
Is there further discussion or do I need to call the question? Where am I, Angie? Do we have a motion on this, Mason?
I'll move approval as the ordinances as submitted with the bold bracketed language in the trespass ordinance containing the changes that were requested by Mr. Gibbs to be included in lieu of the sheriff, the Roman numeral 2 of the sheriff department being present as an exception to the trespass. And I'll move approval of all of those ordinances as drafted.
I have a motion. Do we have a second? I have a second from Mayor Pro Tem Widmer. Is there further discussion?
So if we would rather not have the notification in there, we would vote against it and amend it.
He presented it as well, he asked for it as presented. Yeah, could be. All right, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Did I hear 3-1?
3 to 2.
3-2. I didn't hear you. 3-2. Motion carries. Thank you, Mason, for all the work. Thank you, commissioners, for all the discussion. I want to make a comment on that, Mason, I noticed that in your presentation, you addressed garbage. And it has become a real problem. And I really hope this commission will eventually address every home in Montreat having a bear-proof garbage container. I mean, we just keep feeding the bears. And then people, they say they've got a bear-proof container, but they don't maintain it. The bear's able to pop the lid. Well, he popped the lid on mine one time, but he hadn't popped it since. I fixed it. So I really think we need to consider that in the future, and that's just my opinion. Public comment, floor's open for public comment. Yes, sir, Mr. Smith.
Jonathan Smith, Secretary of Mount Mitchell Bear Hunting Club. I'd like to address a couple of Commissioner Blake's comments and perhaps clarify some of my earlier comments. From our perspective, we don't have any objection to the notification section of the ordinance. I believe that's thank you. I believe that's Article 8. In fact, we appreciate your willingness to make revisions to that to accordance with some of Jim's concerns. I think Commissioner Otto, in a much more articulate way, expressed some of our concerns about the potential for the two conflicts, or the conflict between Article 3 and Article 8. And I'll just, reiterate that we want to be a part of the solution here in the town of Montreat, and we're doing everything we can to keep our hounds from coming over the ridge. But will be a time at some point. I can't say it'll be this year. I can't say it'll be the next, where some will get slipped past us and they'll get down here, and we want to be able to contact the town immediately and come in and get those. And so we see that Article 1 and the fines there do create somewhat of a disincentive to not only us, but others. We'll still call, we'll still come down, and we'll still be a part of the solution, but others may not do the same.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Smith. Anyone else? Mary?
Mary Standard, 118 Shenandoah Terrace. Thanks to Commissioner Widmer for his on-point remarks in response to the auditor's report, particularly with respect to the fund balance, and also to the fact that the town of Montreat for the last several years has been on the North Carolina State Unit Watch List. Between 2011 and 2017, the town of Montreat, for its required annual report required by the state, received a certificate of merit of excellence for financial reporting. Starting in 2018, something happened. I don't know what happened, but something happened. In 2018, the financial report was filed late. In 2019, the town of Montreat was placed on the North Carolina Unit Watch List for cause with internal problems. In 2020, it was again placed on the unit watch list by the state of North Carolina for the annual report being quite late, and remains on that list after the financial report was finally sent in for cause, both in terms of the general fund balance and also for internal problems. As of 2021, in the spring of 2021, it was still on the list. This is not a list that you want to be on. It was established basically by the state of North Carolina following the 1930 bank crisis, in which Buncombe County and the Asheville had the highest per capita public debt in the country. So it's an important thing people watch. The reports really don't say anything about the quality or the status of the finances of the town. They merely state that you as a council have been given sufficient information to make reasonable choices about the town finances. Again, this is not a list that we want to be on. We've been on it for 2 to 3 years now, and we want to be off that list. With respect to the fund balance, this actually gets back to the question that I asked during the public comment time. Is it 24.16% or is it 28%? This has to do with how the formula that's used for that. When it was presented at the February meeting for February 2022, it was 16% for that formula. And when it was presented, and it's on page 17 of the 2021 CAFR, the unassigned fund balance was 24.1%. Again, that difference between this 24 and 28% seems to be based on the formula, the numerator and the denominator, and it makes a difference. So it would be nice to get that cleared up and to be reported at the next meeting for that. And back in July 6th, after I attended the audit meeting and had read the annual financial report, I wrote to a member of the audit committee and asking, I wanted to compare apples to apples and not apples to oranges about the fund balance, and asking if I was correct that the 16% as presented in February was to be compared to the 24.16% that was reported in the annual report. And this person wrote back, and this is a member of the audit committee, and said, I did talk with Darlene, and she could have pushed that number from 24% up to 31% by changing the formula that she normally uses. So just to be cognizant of that, there's a little more to that, but I'll just stop at that. But I would like to have that clarified. Thank you.
There's an accusation there, Mary. I'd like to hear it.
No, I'm asking, I'd like.
No,
to
you
know-
made an accusation. You
All right.
certainly did. You said that Darlene could have pushed it up. There's an accusation there, and that's not right, and that's not fair. And
I
that's typical you, making an accusation and walking away from the microphone. And I'm not going to let it happen tonight.
But
It's
I,
wrong.
this is, this is from.
Mary, you tell me how the formula was figured back when it was set at 35%, because it's changed through the years.
All I'm asking is what the formula
Well.
is. And I will read in, this is something that was sent to me by a member of the audit report. But this is not my statement, but this is from a statement by a member of the audit committee. But I did talk with Darlene. This is not me. This is a member of the audit committee. And she could have pushed that number from 24% up to 31% by changing the formula that she normally uses. Even the CPA firm said they would go along with that. That's disappointing. But she was just uncomfortable changing methods just to have a bit of an increase to make folks happy.
Absolutely.
24%
Darlene is
is an
100%
improvement
honest.
Of the 16% in the previous year. So I was trying to make this statement that it could have been, I give Darlene complete credence and thank you for maintaining her integrity by not changing the formula. Again, I asked what the formula is so that we know what we're talking about. I am deeply disappointed that the CPA firm said they would have no problem going along with changing the formula and would back her up on that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your comments. I appreciate them. And this was my time to comment. Thank you for that.
Okay. Good night. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Shirley Mitchell, 201 Harmony Lane, and I thank you all. I thank you for your time and your thought. I would just want to say something about garbage. As a responsible full-time resident here, I would hate to be required to have a bear-proof container at my house. And I just think of the one, we have a recent one that went up close to here, to have the town just full of these containers. I think it's an eyesore. It's clear that if anyone wants to take their garbage, they can come down here and buy garbage bags, and maybe the people that are renting these houses out should almost be required to buy garbage bags and tell them what to do with the garbage. Anyway, I just hate to have all that. And maybe, I guess you address all the people that rent properties out. Okay, anyway, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Who else? Kayla?
Commissioner Blake, I believe, just jumping back really quickly to the MS4 compliance resolution, you had a
Yes.
question about meeting the resolution, the deadline in the
correct.
resolution. I had some brief correspondence with Mary Roderick while we were in session. She is working on the stormwater management plan, and she believes, it's my impression, that she will be able to meet that deadline.
That's great. Thank you.
The other thing I just wanted to note on your dates to remember, the tentative Board of Adjustment meeting, if it does happen, will not have a Zoom option. I did not catch that before the agenda went out, but I just wanted to let everybody know.
So there is no Board of Adjustment meeting
No,
on the
there,
25th?
there is one
Okay,
right now, but it will not have a Zoom option.
okay.
As of now, yes. Okay, yeah, as of now, it will be publicly streamed, but there is not a Zoom participation option.
Thank you, Kayla. Letter Jean?
Letta Jean Taylor, Oklahoma Road. I wanted to speak about the garbage, and I appreciate Commissioner Blake speaking to that again. I don't know if you all know, we took 17 bears out of Montreat one summer. We had such a problem, and that's why we have a sanitation ordinance in Montreat. And for a while, our ordinance was the model ordinance for North Carolina. People ask us for our ordinance because it worked. And that's what's important, to have an ordinance that works. And so I appreciate that you are concerned more about feeding the bears. And I appreciate Angie or whoever it is that sends out the cards that we can all put on our bulletin boards about what days you get trash and which days you get brush and all those things. It's very helpful to have that card there. And I also wanted to speak to the audit, and I know you all are disappointed as I was to have, probably a third year below 35%. But I don't know if you know why it's 35%. It was an arbitrary, excuse me, an arbitrary number that we came about with the local government commission. We were getting letters every year because we didn't have enough money set aside for a new bridge or a road washout. And so that's why it was set at 35%. And I hope we can get back there too, because you've been very blessed to have American Recovery Funds, to have FEMA funds, to take care of a lot of things that would have come out of our budget this year. We probably won't get that next year. So, but I appreciate you working toward the 35%.
We are hard. We're working hard on that, and staff is too. Anyone else?
Letta Jean, did you say that that 35% was set by the commission in conjunction with the league or the School of Government?
Well, we were getting letters from the local government commission
Local, okay, LGC.
because we didn't have enough money. They didn't think we had enough money in our fund balance. And they were right, but it takes a long time to build fund balance. As you all find out, it's not easy.
Thank you, Letter Jean. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Get a twofer tonight, huh?
Yes, so Shirley Mitchell again. I want to commend to all of you the work of Letta Jean Taylor. There was only one thing I ever differed with Letta Jean about, and it was the location of the new town hall. And I just simply wrote her a letter and said, I don't agree. You have no idea, unless you lived here when she became mayor, the mess that she came into with the people that have been hired by the town. And what did she do? She graciously came alongside these people, really to change them, to try to change them. So I just could not hold her in higher respect, or her husband, who, knowing how upset my husband and I were that our house was not finished in January of 96, was finished in June of 96, for no fee, he came and worked from 8 to 5 on my house just to try to keep me completely cracking up. So that's quite a couple. And, you came in with the controversy about the location of this building, but I cannot hold in higher esteem Letta Jean Taylor to you.
And I too hold her in high esteem. She made it an easy act to follow, Letta Jean. Thank you. Anyone else?
Mary Standard, 118 Shenandoah Terrace. I'd just like to state that for the record, I am a process person. My comments are not meant to be accusatory. If they come across that way, I apologize. But I don't like to feel that I can't speak freely. And I need to make that statement. Thank you.
Mary, I've never shut you down and asked you to leave. I'm just apologizing if I upset you tonight. I did not mean to. But it's, a lot of times it's not what you say, Mary, it's how you say it. It really is how you say things to this commission and to other people that I personally find very offensive at times. And that's why I get upset. It's not what you say. And I always have, I give you the right to say it, but it's how you say it.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we differ in many ways. And part of my training was to find ways to make things better. And in this particular setting, how I say things should not be an issue. And I've sat on that side of the table. And I've never tried to be disrespectful at any point in time. If it has come across that way, I don't believe I've ever called you by names. I don't think I've ever. Well, how do I say this? Attacked you on a personal basis, which I certainly have been by members in the public in the past. But if you don't like the way I say it, I can't help that. I try to present the facts. And I even tried tonight not to read the whole statement, saying that Darlene had stuck by her guns by using the same formula, even when it obviously had been discussed, and that the CPA firm was planning on backing her up should she change her formula to get it from 24 to 31%. I chose not to read that the first time because I felt that that was inflammatory. But again, my role is to speak my way. If you don't like the way I speak, I'm not going to apologize for it. It's who I am and the way I present, just like y'all had a fruitful discussion among yourself about the bear ordinance. You spoke freely. During my public comment time, I should be able to say what I feel and how I feel. So thank you for letting me say that.
Anyone else?
Can I just,
Commissioners' comments. Anybody have comments?
I would just like to comment that, that yes, we have had some challenges in the last couple of years, but sometimes we forget that we are at the highest net worth that we've ever been. That we added $325,000 to the net worth this past year alone in a COVID year. So I think the staff is to be commended, and I am really thankful that we are past some of those issues that we've been working hard to overcome.
Thank you, Tom. Other commissioners' comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Wait a minute, what you need, dear? Right here in front of me. I'll put my glasses. Planning and Zoning Subcommittee meeting on the signage is Tuesday, August the 16th, 10:30 a.m. here. Bridge Aesthetics Committee meetings Tuesday, August 16th at 2 p.m. here Town Hall, and also available by Zoom. Tree Board Tuesday, August 23rd at 9:30 a.m. in Town Hall and by Zoom software. Tentative Board of Adjustment meeting is Thursday, August the 25th, 5 p.m. Zoom is not available. Town offices closed Monday, September the 5th due to Labor Day. Sanitation service will be resumed on Tuesday, the 6th of September. Land Care Wednesday, September the 7th at 9 a.m. in Town Hall and by Zoom software. September Town Council meeting Thursday, September the 8th, 7 p.m. Public forum at 6:30 p.m. All available by Zoom software. Motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Commissioner Alexander moves to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Comments? All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned.